Play safe or be aggressive. That is the decision that you need to make when you're building your matchday 1 squads, because that is going to completely dictate the direction that you go in with your teams. And I'm going to reveal the best draft for each strategy. So don't worry, you are in safe hands. As always, make sure you drop a like on the video, and of course, smash that subscribe button for daily Euro fantasy content. Enough waffling. Let's get into today's video. Okay, so first up, what do I even mean about being aggressive and playing safe? Well, this is going to be all about your chip strategy. And unlike FPL, where you kind of float throughout the season, decide later on what you want to do with your chips because it's a 38 game week season, Euro Fantasy is only 7 match days or game weeks long. So you need to really decide when you are going to use your chips. And again, that is going to completely decide on what kind of playing style you are going for. Remember, you can't play a chip in match day 1 because we will get unlimited transfers. You can't play in match day 4 because they're giving us unlimited transfers once again. So you only have a small amount of opportunities to do so. And I've covered off what I think are the 2 best strategies for your chips. So first up, we have the safe option, we're going to call it, in option 1. And that is going to include you using your limitless chip in match day 3. And a reminder, the limitless chip means that you have unlimited transfers, unlimited budget, but your team will then revert back to your previous squad the match day before. Then in match day 5, which of course will be the quarterfinals, you will use your wildcard chip. Now, what is the good and bad thing about this situation? Well, first up, the good thing about it, it protects you from any potential shock exits in the knockout game. So for example, if you were in round of 16 to build your squad with the unlimited transfers that we all get, if you have loads of Portuguese players and let's say loads of English players and both get knocked out going into the quarterfinals, you would then have your wildcard chip available to completely change your team and bring in those players that are available in the game. So that is a really strong position to be in, and I would call it safe because of course you are backing against the favourites doing well, which from an odds perspective probably isn't the most logical thing, but we always do see surprises in the game. The downside of this, of course, is that you're not being aggressive in the group stages, and secondly, you will have a smaller pool of players to select from when you use your chip in match day 5. Obviously, there's only a small amount of teams left at that stage, and a lot of managers are going to own the same players. All of the big guns will be owned, so you only really have a few differentials that you can sprinkle into your team, whereas in option 2, you have a much larger pool of players to select from. And that maybe give you an opportunity to be a bit more aggressive and gain more ground on managers before they get to their wildcard in match day 5. I think option 1 is a great strategy because of course it protects you, but as I said, it is quite a safe strategy in that sense. Another good thing about option 1 is that we'll have a bit more information by the quarterfinals, so we'll know exactly which players are locked into their respective teams, which could be a really good thing as well. Now, option 2, the aggressive strategy, and the one that I'm actually more leaning towards now, is going to include you using your limitless chip in match day 2 and your wildcard in match day 3. So again, we know what the chips do for themselves. What this does, it essentially gives you 4 free hit chips in a row. Match day 1, you get unlimited transfers. Match day 2, you get unlimited transfers. Match day 3, again, unlimited transfer with the wildcard. And we know we all get that in the round of 16. So you're basically just building the best squad each match day up until the quarterfinals. Now, that is a really strong position to be in because end of the day, in the group stages is when all of the teams, all of the players are available, therefore a larger pool of players to select from. So if you want to be a little bit different, that player is actually available for you to select. Whereas, as I mentioned in option 1, later on, you're not really going to have that luxury. I think we're all just going to naturally revert to the same sort of players in their teams. Now, similar to the option 1 where you have that safety blanket, you don't have that with this strategy. So for example, if you play it in match day 2 and match day 3, then we get to the quarters and a favourite gets knocked out. And let's say you have 6, 7 players in your team of teams that have been knocked out, then there's a problem here because you have limited free transfers. And while other managers will be using their wildcard to get a completely new squad, you might have to take points hits in order to field a team that is going to be even close to what that wildcard team is. Now, for me, being an FPL player, that feels quite safe. That feels nice and cozy. But what I like the idea of is actually being aggressive in the group stages. So having multiple free hit teams where I can just bring in the best players. And we're going to come on to the best teams to target in a second. But as of right now, I think this literally will decide your entire time playing Euro Fantasy. Option 1, nice and safe, and I think it is a good strategy. Option 2 is going all out in the group stages, and you could make enough ground in this stage that even if some favourites get knocked out, they aren't able to actually catch the gains that you are going to make over this period. So at the time recording, I'm leaning now towards option 2 of a limitless chip in match day 2 and a wildcard in match day 3, but let me expand on those points. So of course, if you do go for option 1, then you are building a squad for 2 game weeks. You're building it for match day 1 and match day 2. So naturally, we do need to look, I say longer term. It's only 2 match days, but it's obviously longer than that of match day 2. So the teams that you naturally would target, and of course, you will be sprinkling your team with some players from other teams, but Belgium are a team that have a good 1 and 2 match day. France, England, Germany, Portugal, Ukraine. Those are the core bunch where they not only have a decent first match day, but they have a good follow-up match day. And outside of this, of course, there are some teams who have a really good first match day, but not a very good second match day. But that is the core of your teams that you're going to build off. However, in option 2, you are only going to be building a team for 1 game week. So you will obviously be picking from all of those teams above, but you can also include Denmark, who have a brilliant game against Slovenia. We have Italy with that good game against Albania. Netherlands against Poland, who don't have Lewandowski now for that first game. And the reason why I haven't necessarily put them in option 1 here is because their match day 2 fixture isn't really that ideal. Italy in particular, I've seen a lot of people go for triple Italy who are on option 1, but I don't really want Italy beyond match day 1. So what I do like about this is with option 2, you can have all the teams that everybody else is going to have, but sprinkle your team in with some really nice players. For example, Denmark, you could put Eriksen in knowing that you don't really want him in match day 2 when they have a tricky fixture. And the same is going to apply for Italy. You could be a little bit different. Double up on the Italian defence with that brilliant game against Albania, knowing that they're not going to be in your squad for match day 2, while other managers might be shoehorning in players for the longer term over 2 game weeks. So for me, I feel like at the time of recording, option 2, the aggressive way, is the way to get quick wins in the group stages. And it's the route that I personally am leaning towards right now. But again, let me know yours in the comments. There isn't a right or wrong answer in this situation, but what you do need to do is establish which direction you want to go in, because you build 2 very different teams depending on your strategy. And I think if you go into it not thinking about this first and foremost, you can't really just do it off a whim and do it randomly. I think it is better to focus early doors and then know what you're doing in the following steps. So here I've built a draft for basically option 1, where you're going to be having a team for 2 game weeks and then you'll use your limitless chip in match day 3. And this is quite a template team, it is to be said. We have the front 3 of Kane, Lukaku and Mbappe. Now, I do think if you go for option 2, and we'll come on to a team in a minute, you could actually take a little bit of a risk and go without one of the big guns, Kane or Mbappe, because I do think the fixtures aren't incredible. England obviously against Serbia, and France's game isn't easy either against Austria. So I do think that you could be a little bit different in the option 2 draft, which we will come on to. But if you're going to hold this team for 2 game weeks, I think you have to be a very brave manager to go without Kane and Mbappe. I would only ever do it for 1 game week in isolation. But a lot of these players are very highly owned, and rightly so. DeMarco, you kind of want him for that first fixture, but as I mentioned, do you love him for the next game? Probably not. So you may be looking to free transfer him out in match day 2. Mittelstadt will be in anybody's team regardless of what strategy you are going for. Mark Guy, again, a player at 4.5 who's a great enabler, but do you love him over the 2? Potentially you might, but I think Denmark in match day 2 is actually quite a tricky game for England, so it might not be necessarily the best option. Same applies to Theo Hernandez. I feel like you need him in because you're going to have this team for 2 game weeks, but in isolation, Austria followed by the Netherlands doesn't really feel like the best time to be having these players in your team. So I do think there are pros and cons with this, but when you look at this squad, it is very, very template, and I would argue not many risks are being taken with this squad. Now, again, you can be, and you have unlimited choices what you want to do with your team. Be a little bit different. You could, if you wanted to, bring in Ronaldo for 2 game weeks, but I would be sat here questioning how good his game time would be playing twice in 4 days. Whereas if we go for the option 2 draft, then we will come on to that. You can see that you are only focused on that 1 game. You're not worried about, oh, is Ronaldo going to play 2 games or not in 4 days? And you can just really focus on that first match day in hand. So here is an example of an option 2 draft where it's a bit more aggressive. And as I stated, there is millions of ways, well, thousands of ways that you can do these drafts. They're completely your own preference. But I've just given you a bit of an example here on some small changes that are completely dependent on game week 1 in isolation. So I think the goalkeepers, there's not really much to debate with the goalkeepers. I think whatever direction you go in, I think they're good for match day 1 and match day 2 without going for all the expensive ones that are not really worth it. But take the defense, for example. Got rid of Mark Gaiev, got rid of Teo Hernandez, for example. Gone for the double Italy defence to really target that Albania attack, who I think are pretty blunt, even though they had a good qualifying campaign. We brought in Van Dijk for that favourable game against Poland, but I don't really want him for match day 2. But with this strategy, you can bring him in knowing that you've only got him for that one great fixture. Mittelstadt, of course, is an option in everybody's team. And I've got De Cupia here for his one game. Again, he is a player who's a perfect example of a bit of a differential. He's only currently an option because there is an injury to Munayer in that Belgium team. Could Munayer be back for game week 2? Potentially, but is he for game week 1? Probably not. So whereas in option 1, you can't really take those risks on those players. This is an opportunity for you maybe to go for that one game week punt, knowing that if Munayer is back, then don't worry about it. I'm going to use my limitless chip and my wildcard chip in match day 2. So I really like those small changes that you can make to your team. Now, looking at the midfield, for example, Bruno Fernandes is in regardless of what strategy you go for, but here you can go for some slightly different changes. Or you can bring in the double Germany defence for that brilliant game against Scotland, but I know in match day 2 it might be a bit more difficult for Germany when they play an informed Hungary team. And I've brought in Christian Eriksen, again, a brilliant fixture in match day 1, but you definitely don't want him for match day 2. So you are really kind of starving yourself at these nice differentials in your team if you were to go for option 1. And that is why I think being aggressive in this strategy is actually quite a nice move. Now, when you look at the forwards that I've gone for here, Mbappe and Lukaku are in. I don't really have much deliberation about those two, but I have dropped Harry Kane. Now, again, this is totally dependent on your strategy and whether you want the risk appetite, but I would look at it and think Portugal have a great game to kick things off against the Czech Republic. I think Cristiano Ronaldo will start that game, but I have doubts about him starting in match day 2. As I mentioned, with this more aggressive strategy, you don't have to worry about match day 2, just focus on match day 1, and that gives you a bit more of a breathing space on bringing in Ronaldo, not worrying about the future. So just a bit of an idea here of how different directions you can go with your team and what kind of style you want. I think for me, I'm leaning towards this just because it gives me the opportunity to be really aggressive in the group stage. And then when I come into the later stages of the campaign, I just hope that the favourites win. But end of the day, the favourites for a reason, and upsets are always going to happen. But if they don't happen and you use your wildcard in match day 5, all these managers have made huge gains on you in the group stages to then have a team pretty much identical to those that played them in the group stages. So really interested to know your thoughts in the comments, but I'm leaning towards more of this draft than draft 1. Yes, guys, okay, so just a quicker video here just to go into depth about the chip strategy that I'm planning right now. I will be revealing my final team selection tomorrow. So as always, if you haven't already, make sure you are subscribed to the channel for daily Euro fantasy content. I will also be doing deadline live stream on the Friday in the lead up to the Germany-Scotland game. So I can't wait to see you guys there. If you enjoyed the video, please do consider dropping a like. And if you have any questions, please do comment in the comment section, and of course I'll get to all of them between now and the deadline. Have an amazing day, and I'll see you very soon. Cheers.